In progress.
I'm going to call the Thursday, April 3rd work session of Narberth Borough Council to order. Let's go ahead with the pledge. Ira, can you lead some pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. will you call roll?
Yes. All right. Council President Bush.
Here.
We have Councilmember Spear.
Here.
Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Borough. Here. Councilmember Baldini.
Here.
Councilmember Rickers.
Here.
Councilmember Winston.
Here.
And Mayor Andrew Deutsch.
Here.
All right. Can everyone hear okay with the traffic noise? Do I need to shut those windows? Okay. Seeing no objections, we'll leave them open. But if it gets too annoying, let me know and we can shut them. I do have some more comments. I'll try not to speak as long as Cory Booker did, but the actions at the federal level continue to impact us here at the local level. So I'm sure everybody who's at all looked at the news has noticed the effects of the import taxes that President Trump has put into place. The stock market is currently plummeting. It's important to note that the president doesn't usually have the power to put in tariffs or import taxes. The only reason he has that power is because he declared a state of emergency, a state of economic emergency. He put the tariffs into place over Mexico and Canada, declaring a different state of emergency about drugs. The Senate has currently passed a statement trying to cancel that state of emergency with regards to Canada. So right now, the Senate and the House could, if they voted to, remove those states of emergency, which would then get rid of the tariffs. So feel free to notify our senators. I think Fetterman voted the obvious direction on the Canada bill, but please contact our senators. Please contact, I'm not sure that our House members need much prodding, but they should be voting to remove the state of emergency. It's complete nonsense, and it's tanking the economy. The other aspect I wanted to talk about briefly is the current opinion of the federal government that they have the ability to remove any permanent resident, anybody holding a green card, anybody holding a visa, anybody who is not a U.S. citizen, if they don't like their politics. They are canceling people's visas. They are canceling people's green cards. They just refused a Nobel laureate, the former president of Costa Rica, entry into this country because they don't like his politics. But the people who are already here, they're getting taken off the streets. There are secret police, essentially, people who don't show their badges and don't say their names and travel in unmarked vans, show up and grab you off the street and take you to detention somewhere. They are claiming that they have the right to send people to prison camps in El Salvador. They started out by saying, well, we're only going to send these Venezuelan invaders. But it's quickly expanded to anybody Hispanic looking with tattoos could potentially just be swept up and sent to El Salvador with no recourse, no way to get back into this country. I take this personally because my mother came here from Cuba. Her entire family came over. And if we didn't have if there weren't political freedom in this country for refugees, then I wouldn't be here. I had an uncle who was a pest to the Cuban regime. They kept him for several years. They refused to let him out. He finally got over here, became involved with democratic politics. They ran him for sheriff one year in Monroe County. And, I don't think my family would have come over. I don't think they would have stayed. This country welcomes immigrants and it welcomes a variety of political opinions. And when that goes away, we all have a duty to stand up and protest and do what we can to stop it. There's a protest going on in Philadelphia on Saturday. I am separately going to be in DC for a wedding on Saturday. There's a much bigger protest scheduled there But I would urge you to go out on Saturday and speak out against what is going on in this country. Madam Mayor.
Tagging on that a little bit, as it affects us locally. Right now, business is hurting, and our small businesses are hurting, and they're facing a very uncertain future with the cost of their goods and how they're going to maintain themselves. And I would encourage everybody to support our local businesses and support those who keep our communities vibrant and give local jobs and take care of us in the borough. So to the extent you can make your purchases not online, not with big online retailers, spend your money in the borough, support those local who keep our communities vibrant and worth living in. So to the extent I can encourage you to do that, I would ask that if you're able to, try and do that. Make it extra. But the Mother's Day is coming up. If you're going to buy stuff, spend your money within the borough with your local neighbors who provide jobs and worthwhile environments. So to the extent you can, I really ask that you do that. And let's take care of each other in the borough.
Yeah, I mean, you may not think about it, but a lot of, when we have books, we have multiple bookstores, a lot of books are published in China. I know the toy store carries a wide selection of European and
I don't
foreign
think
toys.
I don't think there is an element anywhere. Even if you think it's made locally, there are elements that come from outside the country. Cans. When you go to the the pet store, the cans, the dog food cans. When you go to the grocery market, cans. When you go any place that has packaging that contains these elements, they're going to be affected. I don't think there's an element that won't go unaffected. So, so to the extent that we can take care of each other and take care of the people in our community, let's do that. Let's do that. So.
All right, thank you. Our first item of business is a presentation item by IGS Energy.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can get my camera working here. Second. All right, maybe it won't cooperate with me. There we go. Everything we were just talking about sounds a whole lot more important than what I have to share with you guys, but I'll I'll try to make it important as well. I guess just as a quick introduction, I'm Graham Liu from IGS Energy. I've been with IGS for a little over 5 years now. IGS is a full-service energy company, so we do everything from electricity, natural gas, solar, LED, EVs, etc. And we were fortunate about now 3 years ago to partner with Narberth on the electricity supply spend via our partnership with the Pennsylvania State Association of Boroughs. So we were originally introduced to the borough through some of our other, borough partnerships. And we're currently working with a little over 60 boroughs across the state of Pennsylvania. And for you guys particularly, it was an exciting opportunity because we were able to both help, secure some lower costs on the electricity spend, but also meet some pretty cool sustainability goals. So I have, some things for us to walk through today. If I talk at you guys for the next 10 or 15 minutes, it won't be very exciting. So please chime in and ask questions. But I will do my best to kind of give you guys a good rundown on where we're at and what we're looking at going forward.
Graham, do you want me to share our screen with the presentation?
If you don't mind, that would actually be great.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I guess before we dive in, do we have any energy experts in the room?
I mean, to what level are we?
Well, I guess we'll find out in a few minutes, right?
in the room who are, worked hard on some of our sustainability measures, but I don't think there's anybody who works for PICO here.
Yeah, fair. And yeah, hopefully, everybody's at least somewhat attuned to, some of the sustainability measures, and, I can kind of fill in gaps as needed too. I've, to be completely candid, I think one of the big challenges has been the fact that I originally started working with Samantha, who obviously had quickly taken a different position after we had put everything in place. And then her successor, Matt, obviously is not with the borough now as well. So definitely excited for a little bit of stability. Alan's kind of been my in between as kind of the only person that I've had a good contact there with since. So I'm just excited to be able to talk to you all and at least introduce it a little bit further to the Borough Council. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and you can jump to the next slide here and we'll take a peek. So just quick background. IGS, we're 35 years in the business. We're now the third largest energy retailer in the space, but we're actually the largest privately held retailer of energy. And the reason that's important is because there's a lot of energy companies out there. A lot of them come and go. I'm sure the folks working in the office get a million calls a day. But we're a little bit unique from the standpoint that we don't report to shareholders. We're very, I guess, oriented to try to focus on the customer as much as possible. And it allows us to be a little bit more strategic with partnerships like the PSAB and like yourselves. So we can jump ahead to the next one. We can skip this too. This is all in the packet for everybody to have. I think one important call out. So when IGS first started working with the borough was originally working through what we would call like a third-party broker in the space. So I guess just to kind of dumb it down, PECO is your guys' distribution company. They will always be your distribution company. You have no control over that. But you do have control over the supply portion of your rate and how you're getting that supply rate. If you were to get it just through PECO, it wouldn't be a very competitive price, and you'd ultimately just be stuck kind of paying what they charge. So you guys have the ability to work with a supplier like an IGS to, one, fix your rate, but also lock in a much lower cost than where PECO is typically at. The other nice piece is that when we had partnered with the borough, doing so directly at the supplier level, we actually eliminated a third-party broker fee that you guys were originally paying by working with a broker group that, off the top of my head, I can't remember who it was, but broker groups are pretty common in the state of Pennsylvania. They're basically a middleman between suppliers and customers. So by eliminating that extra layer in your cost, we were able to secure some nice savings. So if you want to jump ahead, I think it'll give us an idea of kind of where we've been and hone in a little bit more from a cost perspective. So when we first secured a contract, it was a 21-month agreement that was set to expire in January of 2025. And when we secured that agreement, we did so with 100% green electricity. So we would call them renewable energy credits. Right now, we're sourcing from a blend of wind, solar, hydro, to ultimately be supplying 100% green electricity to the borough. And I believe that you guys should have the plaque probably hanging in the borough somewhere. If not, we can get you some new copies. However, the nice part was that when we eliminated that third-party fee, we also secured a pretty significant cost reduction. It was about $32,000 over the 21-month term in cost savings compared to the previous program that the borough had been on. Any questions so far?
So this is just for the electricity that the borough-owned properties use, right?
Correct. Yep. Good question. So the borough buildings, the EV chargers, everything that the borough has a PECO account for is rolling into the current IGS contract.
So the EV chargers are, because I think at one point they were not, but they're on it now.
Yes, they were not previously under the IGS contract. With what I'm showing you today, the EV chargers are under the IGS proposal. So good clarification. I appreciate that. So we can jump ahead. In a nutshell, right now, our contract is expiring in December of 2025. And, when I first jumped on the call, I heard some of the chatter about everything going on politically in the world. And I'm sure you can all imagine the impact that that's having in the energy markets. So I just wanted to walk you all through a little bit about what's going on, so you guys can kind of make the best decision surrounding contract terms and how we want to insulate the budget for the borough. So if you don't mind just jumping ahead we can go, let's see. So this was just a quick look back I guess, to how we've performed against the PICO rate, just to give you some context. So against the PICO rate from, I think it was May of 23 through May of 2025 here, it's been about a $15,000 lower program with IGS. So just to give some context for folks that are maybe less familiar with the idea of contracting with a supplier. Why don't we jump ahead to, the next slide here would be perfect. Yeah, that's great. So when we go out to lock in our rate, there are several cost components that make up a kilowatt hour rate. So obviously everybody would quickly think to energy, which is absolutely the biggest portion of that rate. It's about 65%. But the next biggest piece of your per kilowatt hour rate is called capacity. So I would, I guess, ask you all to think of capacity as a reliability based component. So essentially when you go into the office and Maggie turns on her light, she wants to make sure that the light actually turns on, right? We don't have the rolling blackouts like they do in parts of the country. So the reliability component is synonymous for capacity. And the way that capacity is determined is partially due to how PJM, the grid operator for electricity, sets their reliability rates on typically a yearly basis. And most recently, PJM has established their reliability portion of their costs significantly higher than where they had been the last go around. So you can do a quick Google search, but you'll hear probably a lot more about it heading into the summer. But starting in June, there's going to be a significant increase to all ratepayers' bill, whether you're residential, commercial, whatever it may be, again, due to this capacity cost component. So I'll stop there just to see what questions we might have.
Questions?
I don't think there's any questions right now.
I think that's slightly different from
Cool.
what was in the.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
All right.
graph is different.
I'm sorry, I should have clarified. So we didn't get the updated packet until very late today, so I will be sending out the revised packet. So what we have didn't have the most up-to-date numbers.
Okay.
So we'll be sending out the revised packet and then posting that on the website so people can refer back to it.
And Maggie, am I able to share my screen, or does that not work?
Yeah, we can give you permission to do that.
Okay, because I can share the pricing that I sent you, if so, just to make it easy. And just to give some context too, for the group, when you think about the reliability component increasing of the PJM costs, that's going to impact every single business, every borough, every township, no matter who you are, what you're doing, it's going to have an impact. Predominantly the reason is because we have seen such a big increase in data center, AI, manufacturing growth that, ultimately we haven't really been building generation resources at the same pace to meet all of that new demand on the grid. So the grid right now is really stressed out because we have all these folks that are requesting, extra energy, and we're having very limited resources to backfill or to supply that electricity as a PJM territory. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share.
Here, I'll stop sharing.
Alrighty, cool. Let's see if I can get this to work. Alrighty. Does that look okay on your guys' end?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, like I said, where we sit today, our current contract runs through the end of the year, December of 2025. And with where we are positioned, we are able to start looking at rates in the market for the next term at any point in time. So I had gotten together with Maggie and Alan a couple weeks back just to give them an idea of budget-wise what we would be looking for in 2026 based on where costs are trading today. So across the board, these are different contract term options. So 12 all the way to 54-month contracts with the rate per kilowatt hour listed on the far right, what you guys are roughly using on a contract basis. So in a year, you guys are consuming about 631,000 kilowatt hours. And then roughly what it will be from a spend impact perspective compared to our current position. And this product that we're looking at here is also all inclusive of the green component as well. So I had called out roughly what you guys are paying for green energy on a yearly basis, just so you guys can have some insight as well. But I'll let everybody kind of take a peek and digest this for a second.
Maggie just emailed that, the newest.
Yeah, I just emailed you this one.
That includes this on page 12.
So it's on, page 12.
Sorry. Okay.
I think one thing that's interesting, or maybe a little bit unique about the market right now compared to years past, is that when you actually look at terms that are longer contract terms, you're actually seeing a lower price per kilowatt hour. That is not typical, but right now, between everything we're seeing, tariff-wise, everything we're seeing with colder weather coming from this past winter, natural gas prices being higher, which natural gas prices are usually a good indicator for electricity because we generate a lot of our electricity from natural gas. All things in the short term are, really causing quite a bit of volatility, where you're seeing a discount in the back half of the curve because, again, the short-term market is feeling some of those frustrations. So that gives you a little context behind why those longer-term options maybe look a little bit lower than what you're seeing for a shorter-term contract. Alrighty. So I guess the rest of what we have in here is really just market-based and kind of market-driven to provide a little bit more insight. I think where we are seeing most customers right now land, especially from a Borough perspective, where you're really just trying to set your budget to be able to understand and have some control over your costs, is probably closer to that 36-month range. Ultimately, you guys can position yourself on any term length, and we will definitely be supportive of that. However, that's just roughly kind of what we're seeing from a lot of customer perspective. A nice piece about kind of what my role is as a partner for the Borough is that over the course of the term, if the market would come down or does come down at any point in time, we can always look to refinance our contract or blend and extend, as they would call it, to capture the lower market conditions. So we've actually done this most recently with the Borough. I believe our last contract we had negotiated early, just due to the fact that we were able to secure a little bit lower rate than we were actually previously hedged. So it won't be a set it and forget it piece, and that's really where kind of my job comes in with Maggie, is just making her aware of where the market's at, what opportunities there are, so she can relay the messages to you, and we can make sure that we're staying on top of the spend and trying to drive it down as much as possible.
How long are these rates good for? Like, you're showing us these numbers.
Good question. Good question. So the power market is just like the stock market. It moves on a daily basis. Usually, if you want a rough indication of what power prices are doing, look at what natural gas prices are doing, the NYMEX. So you could do like a quick just Google on what is the NYMEX doing today. You'll see if it's up or down. That's usually a pretty good indication of power prices. So to answer your question in short, these could be good in a week. They could also not be good tomorrow. It really just depends on where the market is. But I'll be very communicative with everyone just to make sure that if we are seeing any big swings up or down, that we're trying to react and take advantage.
Go ahead, Jim.
There's also is there a transmission per kilowatt hour cost as well? And who is that charged by? I think there must be.
Yeah, good question. So transmission is baked into these rates that you're seeing right here.
Oh.
So in the state of Pennsylvania, generation and transmission fall on the supplier side of the invoice, and distribution falls on the PECO side of the invoice. So transmission rates are set on an annual basis, and IGS accounts for the current transmission rates within our supply quotes that we're showing you.
So it's distribution rates that we're not seeing on this chart?
That's
Correct. Distribution is through PECO. Since you guys have been around, it always has been, it always will be. You have, unfortunately, little to no control over those distribution costs.
Right. So the overall cost, distribution is probably going to be like it'd be like up to 6 or 7 cents per kilowatt hour, maybe? Is that about right?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to say because every single one of your guys' accounts fall behind a different distribution rate class.
Yeah.
So it will vary by account. However, what I could do for you is I can get you a all-encompassing kind of layout of what your total costs with Pico are and then what your total costs on a yearly basis with IGS are, if that would be helpful.
That would be nice, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I can put that together for
I
you.
imagine though that, okay, so if the distribution costs are not also increasing, which I guess we don't know if they are or not, this cost percent change is actually going to be lower than what you're indicating here, right, overall, if you follow me.
Yeah, so I'm following your logic. So the comparison there at the bottom and that estimated annual spend is just applicable to the supply and transmission side of the bill. So yeah, I mean, you factor in lower distribution costs, then obviously that's going to impact your guys' total spend. But I think once I provide you that table, that'll give you a little bit better idea of kind of where things stand.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's like a tricky little footnote at the bottom here that talks about the base rate. Like, is that would change these rates, right? Or would that change something else?
Yeah, so you beat me to my next point. So capacity, which we were talking about earlier, that reliability component of costs is currently only known through May of 2026. So what they most recently did was they established a capacity rate from June of 25 through May of 2026 that came in significantly higher than where it had been in years past. So what IGS does is we take a very kind of fair best case estimate on where we think capacity rates are going to land in the future. And then if they land higher or lower, we will simply credit or adjust upwards for capacity. And that's kind of industry standard just because it's a cost component that's unknown and you can't hedge. We just want to provide you at the true cost rather than over collect and you know, be not providing you that kind of fair estimate. So right now, the capacity rates are only known through May of 2026. However, with a lot of the effort that Governor Shapiro has put into reforming some of the rules behind the PJM capacity auction, they are putting in place a floor and a ceiling, which gives us a pretty good idea of kind of where they're going to shake out. And that red line right there shows what we're using as the placeholder. Now, we will know officially what those new capacity component shake out to be in July of this year.
But that would be just for another year, right?
Exactly, just for another year. And the key thing to remember too is, again, capacity is, you know, right now it's a 21% cost component for you guys. If we were to look at the same graphic last year, it would have been close to about 6%. The bulk of your guys' costs fall in the energy bucket. That's about 65% of your supply costs. And being able to hedge energy or lock in the energy portion at a good time is what's ultimately the most important. You know, you can't control where PJM is going to set their capacity costs. It kind of is what it is. But you do have control over how you hedge your energy costs.
I see. So the length of term is really all about the energy cost because that's the one that's...
Exactly. That's all it's about. And it really comes down to, I mean, to make it simple, right? Like, we're sitting here today. Where do we think energy is going to be in 2 or 3 years from now? And I mean, that's kind of the way I try to look at it. Obviously, the market is cyclical. You're going to see up and down swings in the market. But I mean, for the most part, groups that have, you know, positioned themselves with a partner where they can always still reduce the rate like we can, usually they fare out pretty well with those kind of mid 36-month hedges. Any other questions for now?
You can go ahead.
Okay, that's really all I have for you. Again, there's plenty of market info in here. I think, you know, rather than kind of chart and graph you guys to death, I think what I wanted to do was I'm including my contact info in this deck. Again, this is my direct line here, my cell phone. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to call me directly. I'm happy to walk you through any market kind of concept or fundamental in more detail. Ultimately, I'm really here to be kind of a resource for you guys and at your disposal. So feel free to leverage me as much or as little as what you guys deem necessary.
All right. Thanks. I don't see any other questions.
Awesome. All right. Perfect. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Karen.
thanks.
Thanks. So, Joe, I'm going to note that I think Borough Council is going to need an update on the CCA status at some point. Not right now.
Yeah.
Perhaps in the next month or two.
Yep.
Yeah. As we determine what the timeline for setting up a contract here ought to be. Since they're asking us to set up several years in advance, they're proposing that we sign up for several years in advance.
So if you want to lock in for 5 years, then we'll see the other thing.
So we got to make sure that the timelines work out. So, I mean, it looks like they're offering us anywhere from 1 year to 5 years of a rehab, so we have our choice.
Yeah, so as the conversations develop, we can work with Graham on developing what kind of contract duration makes sense for us.
All right. Anybody have any objections with further discussions with Graham? Okay. Sounds good. Our next discussion item is transit-oriented development policy discussion. Right. So I think there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes discussion of should the borough be changing some of its codes, some of its policies to allow for transit-oriented development, to allow for a lot more freedom in the area immediately around the train station and nearby. So the intention of this is just to have a general discussion of some of these ideas, see where council is, and potentially give planning commission a direction if council decides that this is a topic we want to pursue. So we won't be doing a vote tonight on this. We'll just be referring, I believe what we will probably do if council agrees is to refer it to planning commission, just to talk about public comment. So there'll be public comment at the end of this rather than at the beginning, just because we are not making any votes. We are not changing policy at this time. So we had a summary of some transit-oriented development concepts that's in the packet that was written by the chair of the planning commission, Adam Crom, who's here. So Adam, do you want to just summarize a little bit or talk a little bit about how planning commission thinks about this, and then we can talk to council?
Well, we haven't had a discussion specifically about TOD recently. We are working on recodification of the zoning code at the request of council and others to look at ways to make it clearer. A transit-oriented development is essentially what Narberth, of course, was founded as, in the sense that it's a town built around a train station with a mixed-use downtown and a wide range of housing types, including things like row houses, twins, single-family homes, apartment buildings, apartments above shops, and so on. And that's really one of the things that probably is one of its strengths as a place to live, to foster community and local activity. So we would be happy to discuss it further at the next planning commission. The question is sort of, is the current zoning around the train station will allow for the wide range of housing types that we see already in town, in order to support housing choice and development opportunity. And then, we will of course look at the broader community as well, for housing opportunities in general.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody? I suppose if people have questions for Adam, they can ask him, but I think I'd like mostly to hear from council members on this topic. I'd like to come out of this hopefully with a sense of, do we want to have planning commission look at this formally? What do we want them to look at? Sound good? So, Michael, I'll let you start since I know you have a lot of strong opinions here. I'm going to close these windows. It's going to hit a lot.
And before I start, I'll just ask Adam, you're a transportation planner by trade?
Yes, I'm not speaking for my employer.
No, but I'm just saying you have a experience base in this policy area. That's my point.
Yeah, I work for Amtrak in transportation. My wife works for SEPTA in transportation, and I have worked in transportation and urban development since before that. So I've worked in the field for probably 25 or so years, maybe a little longer. As has my wife, who was also the former county planning director. So what we really see, right, is that transit-oriented development, right, is an opportunity to take advantage of the infrastructure that we have, because you could never build a train line like this today. It is prohibitively difficult and expensive to build infrastructure of this caliber. And so we want to make it available to people to use and then to support the economy, right? So if you are living in transit-oriented development, you can often own fewer cars, and that's a huge savings for households, right? Because the average car is at least $10,000 a year, if not more, to own and run. At the same time, you're likely to shop locally, right, and spend dollars more locally. So there's a nexus with making good use of our infrastructure so that we don't, say, push development out to the urban edge, because if the development's happening at the urban edge, we tend to have to build more roads and more infrastructure, sewer, power, all the other basic things that government provides, whereas we can take advantage of that already existing infrastructure here. So, this is something I have worked on for a long period of time. And frankly, that's one of the reasons we live here, is because we really enjoy being pedestrians, and the access that the train station gives you to Philadelphia and then beyond, really, to New York, DC, really the whole Northeast corridor, as well as to Harrisburg in the opposite direction. And then, of course, we are also connected to a number of universities via the train. And then people do come here. If you ever go to the train station in the morning, you'll see, of course, the vans picking up students that come to the train station to go to schools nearby. So, this is something I've worked on for a long time.
Thank you. I've tried to kind of put my thoughts together on this, so I do have some comments as well, and it's going to touch on a lot of things that Adam actually already hit on, but TOD it's a modern name, but it's a very old concept. The idea that as our region grows, we should manage that growth towards transit stations, towards our business districts in a way that supports walkability and commerce, transportation. And TOD is a concept that all of us are familiar with because Narberth itself is TOD, right? Back to the small community of Libertyville clustered around the Columbia Railroad just south of Montgomery Avenue, to the moment that William Thomas provided the right-of-way to the Pennsylvania Railroad to build the tracks right outside this building, to provide our station stop in 1870, which sits to this day at the heart of our town, to Edward Price's decision to take the first major steps to lay the town out around a new train station, to the folks who built their downtown around that train station, the YMCA building, the north side of Haverford Avenue, a mix of spaces for housing and for local businesses. That's the core, the mix of spaces for housing and for local businesses. And then around that core, a mix of various different housing types, apartment buildings, attached homes, multiplexes, just like Adam was saying, to help support the train station, to support our local businesses, to provide spaces that working families could afford. That's TOD. And the folks that built it, them and others, they didn't have a name for what they were doing. They didn't call it TOD, but nevertheless, that's what it was. Because trains only run if there's riders, and businesses only thrive if there's customers, and both of those things are easier to get when they're already here in your own community, right? From our vantage point today, this all feels like predestined, but it didn't just happen. There were debates and arguments and controversy. You can read Our Town, you can read the Mainline Times. It's all in there. When folks like Mary Bauer and William Harris in the early 1900s provided different types of housing that at that time didn't exist in this community at different price points and invited more NARBs into this community, it wasn't without controversy. When apartment buildings like Brenton Hall and Narberth Hall and many others around town were built, people grappled with what that meant for the town at the time. This is the 1920s and before. Those conversations back in the day were not any easier than these, but I think they provide an essential insight, which is that we can look at Narberth's core strengths. We can look back at the very strategies that made Narberth what it is today, and we can use those strengths to address the very real challenges that we here today are facing as a community. The need to support our downtown, the need to support SEPTA service and protect Narberth Station, the need to provide housing options for a growing community, the need to fight climate change and reduce our carbon footprint, the need to manage parking in a way that is actually sustainable and not actually counterproductive. The need to fulfill our responsibilities to Narberth taxpayers and maintain a manageable tax rate while we're also providing a high level of service. The need to proactively manage the very real growth pressures facing this community that are making it harder to afford to live here or run a business here. We know that, the mayor mentioned this earlier, we know that in the era of Amazon and delivery services, we need a strong local customer base in walking distance of our businesses, folks who are emotionally invested intimately in our downtown, folks who are going to show up on the rainy days, not just on sunny days. We know that as land costs in our community continue to escalate, and there's a million reasons why this is the case, but nevertheless it is, the escalation in those land costs are getting passed on to our local businesses as higher rents. This is happening right now. It becomes even more critical in that sort of situation that we broaden our customer base in walking distance of our businesses and that we strengthen that customer base. And similarly with residential, as our residential land costs are escalating and are threatening to price out our friends and family members, it becomes even more critical that we provide a diversity of housing types that can disperse those land costs across multiple different households so that we can actually deliver housing at more attainable price points. We also know that transportation is one of the largest components in a household's carbon footprint, and that every time someone walks to a store, instead of driving to a store, they're reducing their carbon footprint, and then every mile someone rides on the regional rail has less than half the carbon impact of a mile driven in a single occupancy vehicle. And that one of the most reliable ways to support public transit is to house folks near a transit station. We know that people who live near public transit tend to have fewer vehicles. We know that in Narberth, an estimated 9 out of 10 households living in an apartment building with 5 or more dwelling units has either 0 car or 1 car. We know that our municipal tax rate, which was at about 130% of Lower Merion's rate in 1972, is now more than double their rate today, while we're still struggling with deferred maintenance on Borough assets, and we need to figure out ways to maintain manageable, sustainable tax levels without overwhelming our residents. We know that when SEPTA was faced with a funding crisis several years ago and had to sketch out a version of what the future might look like under declining revenues and ridership, it was a future without Narberth Station. And conversely, we know, and our predecessors here knew, that one of the best ways to boost transit ridership, strengthen the transit system, and protect transit access is to let more people live near transit stations. All of these challenges are connected and intertwined, and TOD strategies like the ones that built this town can help us on each of them and more. There are things that we can and cannot do as a borough. There are things that we don't have power over. We cannot control the price of land and housing in Narberth. We don't fund SEPTA. We can't set regional carbon emission standards. But we have land use authority. And the way that we use that power will ultimately define our policy legacy on all of these issues and more, the issues that we say that we care about. So if there's a potential to use that power to serve future generations of NARBs on all of these different outcomes and more, just as those who came before us did, then I think that is a conversation well worth having, and I think we're in good hands with the Planning Commission to help guide us in that conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Let's take a breath. Anyone want to follow? Go ahead, Chief.
First, I echo everything Michael just said. I do want to talk about our downtown. Our businesses, as Andrea mentioned, are struggling right now, and it's simply because there's not enough. There's many factors, but the biggest factor is that not enough people are living near them to support our businesses on a day-to-day basis. They don't have a steady customer base living near them. And I just want to give us a little bit of perspective, because when our downtown was booming in the 40s to 70s, our population back then was over 5,000. 1950 is up to 5,400. We're nowhere close to those numbers. And basically we're relying on people driving in from outside the borough for any additional growth, and that's just not sustainable. I also just want to talk about public transit a little bit more because, yeah, Narber Station could go away if we don't increase our ridership. And we need to prioritize TOD to ensure that we have transit access for our community. I think it's a critical part of who Narberth is. SEPTA's really struggling with funding right now. And Narberth and Wynwood stations are both at risk because of the ridership levels. And SEPTA's collaborating with communities to really increase that ridership through their TOC, the Transit Oriented Communities Program, and also they're providing technical assistance to municipalities to help write the TOD ordinances. So we should look into that as well. And also, I want to talk about our housing crisis. We have a housing shortage in Narberth, which is leading to housing costs that are out of reach for many. That's affecting us in ways that I think is going to impact us for generations. And our restricted zoning right now, I do believe that it needs to address the shortage. Right now, it's illegal to build apartments anywhere in the borough without a long, expensive approval process. And the current standards for the setbacks, the parking, and height limitations, they make building apartment complexes, apartment projects near a train station pretty much infeasible. And I just want to also reference Adam's memo about why smaller scale apartment projects aren't financially valuable. I think we all, like every council member, needs to understand that aspect of it and why it needs to meet a certain threshold to be buildable. And then I think our goals for our zoning is to have a zoning code that works for our community to address the challenges that we're facing today, which is rising housing costs, housing shortages, and our businesses struggling. And I think those standards really need to be context sensitive to what's and the standards, like as related to the setbacks and parking, they really need to be context sensitive to where they are. So in our Narberth Center, that's we just don't have the space, and so we have to take that into consideration. I also want to talk about just the economic diversity. Narberth has always had different kinds of people at various life stages, various economic backgrounds. I think that's what makes Narberth Narberth. It's part of why my husband and I moved here 17 years ago. We chose Narberth because it has that kind of diversity. And I do think that it makes our community stronger, more vibrant, and it helps it thrive. And I'm really concerned that we're losing that. And TOD, the thing is, we can't stop growth from happening. We can't stop change from happening, but we can manage how it happens in a very thoughtful way. And that's what TOD basically does. And I really want to keep Narberth an inclusive community. So that empty nesters that want to downsize, they can stay in our community, making space for other families to join our community. Younger couples looking to rent here before they buy, they can do that as well. The younger generation of Narberth families who grew up in Narberth and wanting to move close to their families again, they can do that. And the younger generation of firefighters wanting to live in a community where they want to serve, they would be able to do that. And I think we should strive to be that kind of community. I also want to address parking and traffic congestion concerns, because inevitably that always comes up. And I do want to echo what Michael said before about TOD. It reduces the number of cars per household. TOD-style households, they own less cars, as Michael said. They walk more, they bike more, they use transit more. and we have lots of data to support this, and thank you for sharing that data with all of council. And if another point I want to make is that if our current parking requirements were actually applied to our existing housing stock in the borough, our downtown would look very different. It would be paved over by parking lots. And that's not the kind of community we're going for. I'd rather have people here, people who can support our businesses. I'd rather have businesses, space for businesses to thrive and be part of our community. So I just want to make the point that excessive parking requirements, they hurt our businesses, and they have to be context sensitive to transit areas. They take away space from members who could live here and support our businesses. They take away space from our businesses. It also raises the cost, it drives up the cost for developers, which in turn drives up the cost for rent for our businesses and our residents. And then, climate goals. We have a climate action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The TOD, there's a lot of data to support that it reduces greenhouse gas emissions. The housing types that are generally associated with TOD, they're more energy efficient, and TOD also reduces reliance on cars, which transportation is a huge part of the climate impact as well. And I also want to talk a little bit about missing middle housing. I think that's a discussion that's separate from TOD because, and I think we should definitely look at that and consider zoning amendments to allow that missing middle housing like anywhere in the borough, including in a 3A, which is currently zoned for only single-family homes. So that's duplexes and triplexes and cottage homes and things like that. But I don't think it belongs in a transit area. I think it's a different kind of housing that is more appropriate for that. And then, we like TOD is a well-proven policy, and Michael shared a lot of like data and research to support it, and I think our planning commission has a lot of expertise in this area as well. And our land use policy and zoning code are basically our best tools that we have available to us to shape what our community is going to look like, not just 5 years from now, but 50 years from now. So our community really needs us like to take a look at this and take action on solutions we already know works in communities all over. And I don't think this is an aspirational thing. I think this is 100% necessary, and it's probably one of the most important things we can do for our community. I think it's on us to act on zoning policy to address what I think are two of the biggest challenges facing our community right now, which is the housing shortage and our struggling businesses and our struggling downtown. The zoning policy, I believe that goal should be to work towards a community that's strong, resilient, and connected, and sustainable for generations to come.
All right, thank you, Jean. And Cindy, you want to go up next?
Sure. I have one comment and 2.5 questions. The first comment is we're elected to make evidence-based decisions, but I would also argue that we're elected to represent the people, our neighbors' interests and desires. And the number one issue that I personally, perhaps you don't, the number one issue I have is folks saying, no more apartments. It's enough. And that matters. That opinion and that sentiment matters to me. My 3 questions. 1, there are options between $1 million single homes and apartment buildings for rent. I would like to know what can be built to accommodate that multifamily, that missing middle, so that folks can build equity, not rent. Jean, I hear you. empty nesters, young ones. I'm an empty nester. I'm not renting a $3,000 apartment. I want equity. My daughter's a public school teacher. She's never going to rent a $3,000 apartment down by the train. She would never be able to afford it or save a dollar. I would like other options besides renting expensive apartments. The second question is, we've added 100-ish apartments downtown. What is the harm in seeing how our community tolerates such mass development before we move forward with a TOD? And otherwise, iterative change. This is massive. What's the harm in pausing right now, allowing our community to catch up so we can evaluate? The half question is, I would like to know what can currently be built by right at 198, and is that an opportunity for us to encourage some of that missing middle housing where folks can build equity? That's all.
All right, since one of those was phrased as a question, Cindy, I'll tell you that I don't think legally we can say that we want to pause apartments. I think that we have to allow them, in my understanding of the law, not just like leaving aside the politics of it, my understanding of the law is that we need to allow this building type in the borough, and we need to make it realistic that somebody can build an apartment in here. Otherwise, they can come in and sue us. So,
Wait, let me clarify.
We can't talk about
Why?
pausing,
No. Why would we change to a TOD right now?
That's a
I'm not saying outlaw apartments. I'm saying.
I just want to clarify there. That's
Yeah.
a fair
Look, I'm
question.
not saying we outlaw apartments.
We can't outlaw apartments.
Well, but that was the original question, wasn't it?
Well, nonetheless.
No, it
She's
was.
clarified her point, which is
My
more about
question
the
was,
activity changes. Yeah.
what is the harm in pausing? Why do we need to do a TOD zoning change right now? Can we pause, let the apartments be built, evaluate, and then consider a TOD? I didn't say outlaw apartments.
Just the way, okay. Ira, though, thanks, Cindy. I'm not sure we have answers for your other questions at this time. But
You know what, there's stuff for council to consider and the community. I mean, I do want to hear from community members.
Yeah,
because
public
I think that
comment's
counts.
going to come up after we're done with the
Yeah.
business today, since we're not voting. Ira.
Right, so, the last time we were looking at, projects in that general area, one of the major concerns that came up from the community was the parking. But since then, we've built at least one, complex that's been open for a while now that has 56 units. And at the time that was being planned, there was a big debate about like how many cars would actually show up, right? Like some people said 2 cars per unit, others said like a half a car per unit. I think we were required to go with 0.9 cars per unit, and that's how we came up with 52 spaces.
That sounds right.
Okay, so the question is, like, what happened? Like, and I know that it's because of the nature of it might have affected it, but like, are there 0.9 cars there? Are there 0.5? Are there 2 cars per space? Because we did, some of the experiments Cindy's talking about, we just did. With at least with one complex. The others aren't really open yet to any extent that we could measure or anything.
That I do know. A couple years ago, I talked to the owner of that.
Okay.
About exactly that. Cause I was at the Elm, right?
Yeah.
As to what happened there. And at least at that time, he told me that the apartments were fully booked up, but the garage was not, and they had extra spaces, and that the average was below 1.
Okay, well, so, okay.
Yeah, well, wait, I do want to add, there was a mistake in the office and they gave out parking permits to Forest. And I can tell you, I know 2 residents whose car I do see parked on the street. So I'm not sure that's accurate because we actually did give parking permits to folks on Forest, if you all remember that. So we should check those data.
Those permits have been revoked.
Well, let's just say that it came out pretty close to the estimate of 0.9. I mean, like plus or minus a bit.
Yeah, I mean, those folks,
It wasn't 2 or 0.
They don't have parking permits, they're not getting constantly ticketed, so they are solving their parking needs, and as far as I know, I mean, nobody's complained to us about people
True.
from the Elm parking in their space. Council hasn't gotten those concerns.
Oh, okay.
I think it has worked out more or less as.
Okay, so then I just have one last point, and then I'll let other people speak. And I know it's not finalized yet, but if one were to hypothetically put an apartment building on that block, what would the multiplier be there? Are we talking about 0 and everything's on the street, or are we talking, somewhere between 0 and 1 cars per unit?
In terms of like what the ratio would be?
Yeah, I mean, just an idea.
I don't know, I would look to planning commission to provide some expertise on that. Because I mean, so it's actually a really interesting point. Let me see if I can find this. Any parking ratio that you find in a zoning code in the United States of America is largely arbitrary.
Right.
There's a really great quote from the president of the entity, the ITE, upon which a lot of these were based. And it's a really great quote, so I want to pull it up to answer that question. But I think that in terms of the specifics of what you're talking about, that would, I think, be answered by the planning commission.
That's fine. I'm just saying, the point I was going to get to is that if it's 0, it's going to be, in my opinion, a problem in that area. Okay, because, I mean, even now you go past there, there's not a lot of spaces available right there. So I don't think we can go from what we were proposing, the point 0.9 or whatever, down to 0.
Yeah, I think right now the requirement would be somewhere around 0.9. You get credit for having studio apartments, you get some on-street parking credits, but otherwise it's pretty much 1 per unit. That's my understanding of the current requirements.
Okay, but into this
it'd be
plan.
about 0.9.
No, that, I mean,
Well, it's going to be what we ask. I mean, I don't think that.
Yeah, I'm just lobbying for it.
Not to be 0.
Yeah, I mean, another way to do this is to introduce this more gently, is not to go right to 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to, because this is actually really a great quote. So this is from the president of the Institute for Transportation Engineers. Their research, I'm using that in quotes, was used to inform a lot of municipalities that kind of took their numbers, plopped them into zoning codes across America. Other municipalities copied those. These were based off of non-representative samples of things. The president of the ITE said a couple years ago this direct quote, and it's excellent, so I want to read it out. We expected you, speaking to municipalities, to be smart. The thought was we'd put it out there, you'd be smart, you'd use it well. It was wrong to put it out there without the cancer warning in big, bold letters. If you want to be stupid, copy these numbers, you're a moron. That's directly from the president of the entity upon which so many of our zoning regulations on this specific topic were based.
Yes, I'm just trying to.
No, that was not to you. I just thought it was, I carry this quote with me everywhere, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone enjoys it as much as I do.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to stop the, sort of assumption that people might go that when they say reduce, they mean none.
Right, planning commission will look at, yes,
That's
so
all.
they will
That was my
figure
only
out.
All right, some folks haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, okay, I'm done.
You good, Ira? All right. Jim?
Sure. I would definitely be supportive of sending this to planning commission for exploration. It sounds like they're eager and equipped to do it. I spent several years on planning commission myself, and these were concepts we talked about more abstractly. We did not end up with a TOD overlay at that time. There were also, a lot of things that could have been done better, and I think I would welcome the continued research into this. I want to thank Michael for his leadership on this, because it's really been an education for me going to a number of these housing forums and conversations and events we've been to, and that we really do have barriers to smart development in this town, that really do prevent certain common sense things from happening here. We still, sadly, the developers still want to put up giant $1 million, even larger than $1 million, $2 million, I think we're like $2 million houses now. And that is just not the way we should be developing in this town. We should really be looking to see what we can do to enable a wide variety of different housing options, from, particularly smaller ones that will, by definition, come at a lower cost. So I would certainly be supportive of this going forward. I look forward to the conversation.
So it is me.
Well, I mean, I'll reserve my right to speak last, so if you'd like to say something.
Yeah. So, in general, I'm in favor of transit-oriented development. My son and his girlfriend live right next to the Paoli train station, and they are probably the paradigm of the kinds of people that we'd be talking about living in this. She commutes every day down to Drexel. He commutes out to Lancaster to the mayor's alma mater, Franklin and Marshall. And they do not own a car, neither of them. There's a generational aspect to this that I think some people don't understand, that, cars are extremely expensive. Younger people don't want to pay for the gas. They're environmentally aware and conscious, and they don't necessarily feel the need for a car. They Uber, they Lyft, they save tens of thousands of dollars a year, between the amortization of a new car, gas, insurance. They don't have to pay for any of that. I've had some discussions with members of the community about, you gotta have, car. People in this community are two-car garage kind of people. That's what we have in town. And I guess my answer to that is to quote from Field of Dreams to say, if you build it, they will come. It's that's because that's what our housing market currently is. So we're attracting those kinds of people. I'm not so concerned about reduced parking requirements because or in general, reduced setbacks. I think for me, the concern is the devil is in the details. Most particularly with height and with density. I think we have to, balance this against the look and feel of the town. And, zoning codes don't necessarily capture that. We can't, there's basically we're not the design police, as I think the president has said in the past. And so the question is, you've got to be really careful when you create transit-oriented changes to the zoning code that you're not creating a monster. If that means a certain trade-off on the height limit, that is more consistent with the rest of town. I recognize that may limit a developer's interest in coming in because they're going to say, if you take what's been presented to us, that there's cost to building an elevator, so you need to add additional stories. I worry that we don't want to be so generous in considering these things that we're going to create the kind of massive complexes that, quite frankly, our community doesn't support. And I think I agree with Cindy that, we have to be reflective of the community's needs. I am very interested, I do absolutely want, housing diversity. Jean said it, the first thing when I walked into the civic association meetings, somebody stopped me, and I think I've said this anecdote before, somebody who's been a long-term renter here for 30 years is very concerned about her ability to age in place. We know from the Narberth ambulance that, there's a significant number, the highest number of calls in Narberth are slip and falls in the house by our elderly population. They should be able to move into a safer environment and still be able to stay in the town that they love, that they've lived here forever in. We need to balance those things. I don't want people out there to think we're in this whole hog without being really, really deliberate. I'm gonna be very, very deliberate going forward on these plans to figure out exactly what this means in terms of making sure that, you know, we don't, and going for the good, and I recognize, you know, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. And going for the good, that we don't create secondary, well, no, I'm going to say primary issues that create something or allow for something well beyond what at least my tolerance would be for these projects.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Andrea?
So, I'm an old dog, and it's hard for me to learn new tricks. I tend to not like change. That's my nature. But I have to congratulate everybody at this table and Cindy, because you've all raised really good points. And it's all been a very thoughtful, intentional discussion about specific areas. We do want to support our downtown. We do want to provide different housing stock for people who can't afford $5,000 apartments, or even $3,000 apartments. I learned from Mike that the Montgomery Court apartments were built, and right now they're currently the most affordable apartments in the borough. They're older, and Mike actually, when we were talking, raised a point that I hadn't considered. You know, one of the reasons Montgomery Court is more affordable is because it's older, and the new stuff does tend to be more expensive. But in 20 years, that will be the older stuff, and that will be the more affordable thing. So as our middle-aged folks get older and get towards a point where they want to rent, in 20 years, those will be, you know, some older places and hopefully more affordable in comparison to the current new stuff that's up then. There are valid points that everybody has raised. And I do want to be able to live here when I retire and can't afford the maintenance on a big house. You know, I want starter families to be able to come and stay and live in the apartment, live in the borough and contribute to our community. Right now, it's getting farther and farther out of reach. So I have questions, like how's our infrastructure in the downtown going to support greater density? How are our sewer systems and water systems all going to support greater density? I believe it's got to be something that's very deliberate and very thought out and not made rash, but it's something that we can look at and explore and question and see how to make it work. I am open to learning, and I'm also open, to Cindy's point, listening to the community. People have concerns about growth. They don't know. They've had so many concerns about the Elm, and like the parking's gonna be outrageous and everything. I work every day right next to the Elm. The parking has not been bad. The parking's been navigated. Sometimes our fears get ahead of us, a fear of them. So it's something worth looking at, hearing from the community. So there are members of the community that don't want any new development. But you know what? There are some who are very, very open to it, but for the environmental impact, for the impact to our downtown. So it's not everybody's on one side or the other. We do need to listen, but we need to look at it as a whole, as a total examination. So I encourage the discussion. I encourage looking at it, and I encourage the Planning Commission taking into consideration the concerns of all involved, and not dismissing any portion of the community as being, well, they just don't want change. Listen to their concerns, and let's see how we can address that and make it work. Let's look for solutions and not look for obstacles, and consider the future Narbithians who are going to be here as we all get a little older, because none of us is going the other direction. But be mindful change. And that's what I would just encourage.
All right, thank you, Mayor. exercise my prerogative to speak last. I've long thought that the best places for us to focus our attention for development are in the downtown area where it's already developed, it's right near the train station, and where people have talked eloquently about how much of an advantage it is to have lots more people in that area specifically. And then on Montgomery, where it's already a major highway, where there are large empty spaces and a lot of development already. And it's not a coincidence that the major projects that have come in since we've been here have been on Montgomery and downtown. I think it is a matter of deciding what is the best approach to handling our downtown, what is the best approach to handling Montgomery, to encourage development in those spots. With our Historic District Act, we've made it very difficult to do any kind of development in the residential areas of the borough. If your house is built before 1945, it's going to be extremely difficult for anybody to come in and make significant changes. They might be able, you can maybe put an extension on the back if you want to do something. You could put an ADU out in front, but you're not going to be able to tear down your house and put up, a quadplex or something. So all of that, all that demand, all of that desire that might be to live in Narberth, to come to Narberth now has to be focused on the areas of town where we do allow development, where we do encourage development. And I think that looking at what might be limiting projects in these areas where we've decided, this is where we want to have development, that's appropriate for Planning Commission to look at. And I would add that, we're talking about trying to keep housing prices down. And I think if you just look at the prices of the new apartments, or you look at a price of a new house in Narberth, it's not going to be cheap. Even the cottages, they are putting up some smaller houses in one of these new developments. It's still a lot of money. The idea is that once these houses are built, once these apartments are built, then the older apartments come down even more in cost. So, maybe you won't be looking at the new apartments that are coming in over Jenny's Ice Cream because, oh my goodness, but you might want to look at Woodside Court, or you might want to look at the apartments that are already over the shops on Haverford Avenue, because the prices of those are likely to come down. I mean, that's what you see in cities like Austin. So I used to live in San Antonio, and Austin was the place. It was like the super hip place to live for a while. And it was also super expensive when I first got there. But Austin has done a ton of building, and now prices in Austin are lower. They haven't gone up, whereas pretty much everywhere else in the country they have. Now, I'm not saying we're going to resemble Austin in any way, but the logic is that the new apartments then reduce the prices of the older units. And that's what you see when you look at economic research of what happens when you build more units. It's not, people are going to want to live in Narberth because we're so close to Philadelphia and because we're in the Lower Merion School District. Leaving aside the charms of our downtown, just our location is so valuable these days. So it's a matter of figuring out how best to accommodate that demand and welcome new residents while keeping the character of Narberth. And I think the Planning Commission is in a good position to help us work through that. So let me just go through. Adam had some recommendations on his letter about sort of zoning standards that enable TOD. So this would sort of be, if we're going to give Planning Commission a charge to look at this is what Adam suggested might be some topics to look at, which are reduced parking requirements, not zero, reduced setbacks, a height limit that allows for apartment buildings, appropriate lot coverage standards, and consolidated driveways.
Fred, can I add a question in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Why are we not ever considering, we're making this all about parking, and that was not my point, that it's more than about cars, but about the opportunity for people to build equity. Why are we not asking, this is the second question I get all the time, when is it going to be condos? Why are we not asking, could these be condos so people can actually age in place that are kind of against renting or have it be a first starter home? Why not condos?
Why not condos in general? I think the argument is that denser construction near the train station makes more sense. We want more people living near the train station. That's what I'm hearing from, no?
Well, you can still have 20 apartments or 20 condos. Why would we not ask them to explore that?
I actually had the same question, Cindy, and Mike actually had some ideas on that.
Yeah, so the first thing is that zoning codes don't normally differentiate with the tenure of the unit itself. But in terms of the question of why don't in the broader area we see a lot of condos, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding, and this is the case in a number of states, is that the state legislatures over the course of various years, and I'm not a condo lawyer, my understanding is that state legislatures have adopted a lot of strict condo liability laws that have a longer tail on them that often make it more difficult for builders in the current environment to do that sort of work. So there may be state regulatory issues that are a problem that maybe the state should take a look at. I would say additionally though that we have examples here in Narberth of buildings that have started out as apartment buildings that have become condos over time. Great example, the Wynmont condos on Montgomery and Wynwood. So those were built in the 1950s as an apartment building. At the time, it's interesting, you can kind of tell from news coverage at the time that, and looking at the census records in terms of what the average rents were, that those, when they were first built, they were more expensive, consider them like the luxury apartments of their day. In the 1980s, they were converted to condos. And suddenly all of those great data set, all those units sold all at one time. You can take that, you can compare it to the average sale points at the time. It was initially more expensive, a couple decades on, now they're about average. We still see those units selling to this day. They're some of the most affordable sale points in the borough.
Yeah, you've educated that on me. I really, again, I would like to go back to the equity. You know, how can we ask the Planning Commission to say, how can you provide a diverse housing sample that includes opportunity at different ages, at different economic points to build equity in this borough? And that can be dense equity, but equity. And that's, again, the second question, my first being why now? Can't we wait until the apartments are all come to fruition and are rented to have this conversation? But if we're not going to wait, at least please add the question of what are different type of housing between the mass single and the apartment complex? What is that missing middle, and what would that look like in a TOD, specifically 198 Elmwood?
I mean, we can add that to our charge to the Planning Commission.
I love that question.
I don't think we know the answer to that necessarily. Yeah. So it would be.
I interjected if you're creating that list.
Yeah. I think Mike is also interested.
And I think that I'm very, very interested in Missing Middle. The beauty of Missing Middle is that it works everywhere. That's the beauty of Missing Middle, is that it's a very flexible housing typology. Apartment buildings, because of the nature of modern building codes and other sorts of things, they only work on properties of a certain size. You just physically can't fit them for a number of reasons. This also, I think, speaks to one of the things that Mike brought up earlier. So you're not gonna see the types of things you see in King of Prussia. We don't have large, huge tracts of land. So even on properties in Narberth that could fit an apartment building, they're gonna be an infill style of apartment, not some sort of kind of massive complex. But that in conjunction with the historic preservation ordinance that we have that expects that most pieces of property in the borough will be preserved makes it really, really, really important that when we do actually have the odd property of a certain size that actually could fit an apartment building, it makes it important that we actually activate that for that type of housing, because we know that Missing Middle typologies can work very flexibly in a lot smaller spaces. And historically in Narberth, like most of our multiplexes started out as larger single-family homes and were kind of converted over time. So you have all of those elements, and I think you have all those elements, and we're also, theoretically required by the state to actually allow all these different housing opportunities elsewhere. It gets kind of hinky because municipalities sometimes try to block them in different ways. But I think that in terms of like actually looking at this from the spirit of what the state expects us to do, it is incumbent on us to actually take a hard look at, what different properties could actually feasibly fit. And if apartment buildings as a typology couldn't reasonably fit in a lot of different things, actually looking strategically at where they could fit. Both from a logistical, physical perspective and from a planning perspective of TOD and the areas where they make the most sense.
Yeah, I would say like Narberth we have limited land, and I do think we need to be very strategic about how we manage that growth. And like Michael said, like I agree with you, Cindy, we do need that missing middle housing as well. But there's so many other places that could go. But I think
I would like to see that. Yeah.
And I don't think it's
I would
appropriate
like to
for
see that.
transit.
I think that has to be part of the package. It can't just constantly be apartments. What else is there? We've mastered the $1 million single. We've mastered the apartments.
When you say we,
I would really like the planning commission to show me again opportunities for equity and that missing middle.
I'll work on an item and bring it back to council focused on missing middle. You have my commitment.
Okay, thank you. And thank you.
Yeah, because I like to see that too. I think of like the type of garden apartments that you see sort of in Southern California. There are 2 stories around a central courtyard. They don't have the same kind of feel. I mean, it requires a bigger footprint because you're basically in a horseshoe, but you've got a nice space in the middle. And I've been since this came up, I've been trying to walk around town to figure out where could that go, and I don't know that there are those kinds of opportunities, but I'd sure like to know if we could see where those are, sort of echoing Cindy's concern. I worry about, you talked about our fire cars, our policemen don't live and women, they can't live anywhere near here. It sure would be nice to have the people who serve our community be able to live in our community.
Right.
And I think it's, if my wife were single, she couldn't afford to live here because she's a teacher. And, she could not possibly live anywhere in town on her teacher's salary.
all right, I think we have consensus on sending this to the planning commission for further discussion. And I don't know if you need us to write it up formally, Adam, or if you're comfortable going ahead based on the outline you.
That's up to you, I guess.
Okay,
I can write an email summarizing some of the points that we discussed tonight. And
Sounds good.
We can direct that to planning commission so that can be included for the Monday meeting discussion.
yeah. All right, thanks everyone. Okay, committee reports. I know infrastructure does. Do you have one?
We did meet recently, but it's mostly stuff that was reported out here shortly before, shortly after, which was about the bridge. So I don't know that I need to, has anything happened on the bridge since we last met?
Yes, actually, so let me just pull that up real fast.
Okay.
So the update on the bridge is that the bid contract was advertised on Tuesday. So big congrats and thanks of appreciation to all of our consultants who were assisted with this at Pinoni and PennDOT and SEPTA. So the job was advertised and then it's going to go out. The ECMS let date is May 8th. The contractor will be selected, so it's the lowest responsible bidder. And we did talk about having that contractor then come in, so we've tentatively penciled whoever that will be to present at the work session, at the June work session, before you all, since we take a break for the summer work sessions. So I think that timing will work out well, so we can have that presentation by the contractor then.
That will be after we approve it, or that will be before we approve it?
That will be after.
Okay. I mean, we have to approve the lowest responsible bid, so it's not really.
Understand, when we.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm sorry, so.
That sounds fine.
Okay, right.
When we use the word responsible, are there objective standards for gauging what that means?
Yes, and again, we're gonna be relying on our consultants to be monitoring kind of who's gonna be qualified based on the responses. So since the bid went out for advertisement, this is now, contractors are gonna see that, they're gonna have an opportunity to ask questions, clarify things, so Pannoni will be taking point on responding to any inquiries that come through from interested contractors. And then that will be, they will then submit all of their bids, right, and then that will be selected at that time. So, yeah, so Pannoni's gonna be handling point on all of this, and we'll be vetting all of those contractors. Given that this is a federal job, there's a lot of people who kind of specialize in that sort of work, so we do anticipate that those folks will be the ones who will be responding to this bid.
Just because we have waited so long for this, and it's really important it's done right.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
And we still are operating under the understanding that it'll be 100% covered by the federal government.
Yes,
This week.
we do have that 10% down payment that we'll need to make, which we've accounted for with our budget, so that money is set aside for that. So we'll be making that over the next couple of months, that payment. But then, then we should be all set to go. And like we've been talking about the scope of work, so we're not yet on Amtrak's construction schedule, but we're hoping that with the movement that we're going to be seeing, that this will kind of solidify our slot on that schedule. So initially what we'll see from a construction is going to be stabilization and various site work and utility work as kind of the first phase of the project before we actually see the bridge itself being taken down and then rebuilt. So keep you all informed.
So just to give you an example, what can go wrong is that a contractor misses a whole piece of the scope, and then their bid is, like $1 million
Oh,
less
yeah,
than everybody
that's
else's.
right.
Someone reviewing it will see that they missed that,
Right.
because you don't want to pay them the lower amount.
Only to
And
find
then
out.
find out
yeah.
that they didn't do that, and then they're gonna try to make it up somehow.
Right.
So that's the kind of example.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course,
Right.
of course. But I think that's part of it, clearly. The other part is, they're competent to do the work. Yeah.
So then the other major thing we talked about is the stormwater bump outs. And there were some public comment, a rare event at an infrastructure committee meeting, but some folks came. We had invited the community, the neighbors to come.
Right.
And there was some, concern about that there were some nearby bump outs. And why did we need to put them, so close to the others? And the engineer did a pretty good job of explaining, how, the direction that the water flows. This picks up locations that weren't picked up by the other ones. But I think by the end of the meeting, the engineer had agreed to go back and double check to make sure that these were sized correctly. Because, in their largest configuration, they're 50 feet long. Right, is that, isn't that what this?
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
about 40 to 50 feet,
Right,
It's big.
right, so that takes up
which is about
2 to 3
two.
parking,
Two.
2 parking spaces. So they were looking about, reducing it so they may take up, 1 less parking space.
Correct.
So. But I guess that they're coming back to the next meeting, I think, with that.
Yes, so just an update on that. Our engineers did confirm that they're going to be looking at maintaining the 2-arm railing, but they believe that they'll be able to reduce the size so that it's going to be a shorter bump out, so as to not take away as many spaces. But again, the location of them is really advantageous just because of the capture drainage area and the sediment load that those BMPs will collect. So it is recommended that we still have the 2, but they do believe that they can shorten them, which will reduce the impact on the reduction of parking along that block.
But there was also a statement made, which is, I understand. He said, well, how come all the bump outs are on the north side and so forth? But, why don't put some on the south side? But I believe that the nature of the drainage is that the ones we have listed on the north side right now are higher, they capture more sediment.
Right.
But there are, on the overall map,
Topography.
on the overall map, there are some that are on the south side.
Right,
Okay.
and again, out of the 30 or so that were identified, and they were prioritized based on the sediment capture. So we're targeting the ones that have the most capture. And so if we're gonna be putting our money in these BMPs, we wanna implement the ones that are going to have the most bang for our buck in the first few rounds of implementation.
Maybe next year's we'll include some on the south side.
Okay, well, that was just what I wanted to mention.
Noted that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, thanks. F&A didn't meet.
You have not met since the
Okay.
last council meeting.
Public health and safety.
Public health and safety did not meet, but we meet next week.
Okay.
I do want to mention that April 12th is planting day for Shade Tree Commission. And they need more volunteers, so if there's any volunteers who want to help come out on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock and plant some trees in their neighborhood, it's a great, fun opportunity. Unfortunately, I'll be away, so, but they need some volunteers.
This Passover's Saturday night, so I think that's why they're short of some people. Can I just ask from Public Health and Safety, the speed bumps, I got asked before I came tonight. I know we sent out the notices to the folks on Meeting House.
We did.
So is there a time frame for actually putting the speed bumps
So,
on Meeting House?
trying to recall what Jeff had mentioned to me.
Okay.
It was, what, do you recall what I said?
Well, no, it was April something, but I can't remember.
I thought it was this month, right?
Like mid-April,
Yeah. Okay.
mid-April, I
Let's-
believe,
I'll
is
just
the
let them know.
target, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to mention was Chief John String and I are working on a traffic safety calming policy for, or just a direction. So we're going to have that as a discussion point in next week's meeting.
Okay.
And Jean, to confirm, I do have Al Davey from the Narberth Ambulance will be giving a presentation next
great.
week as well.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Public comment. So appreciate you guys. Yeah. So let me summarize. It'll be 3 minutes. Just start with your name and your address, and then you may begin your comment. And sure, John, you want to go first?
Thank you. John Monroe, 413 Grove.
Yep, you may go ahead.
So I was motivated to comment tonight by the anticipated proposal from the Planning Commission to loosen zoning and potentially raise building height limits to accommodate future developments in the borough. This is a shocking one considering we were told back in 2015 that if Narberth adopted the much lauded form-based approach to zoning, we would experience a major alleviation of the development woes that ail us and be able to preserve the cherished character of our beloved town. We were told we could accomplish all of this and drive down outrageous rents to increase borough revenue. We've experienced the opposite. Anyone with functioning eyes can see that the character of the town has been drastically altered. Rents continue to climb to astronomical levels, with the average now standing at about $4,500 a month. All working class and virtually the vast majority of middle class residents are locked out of the potential for making a home in Narberth. We have no regulation, no registration or oversight of landlords operating in the borough, a fact that in recent years has proven to be deadly. The developers we have allowed to build have exercised flagrant disregard for the character of the town. We now are expected to loosen building restrictions to further accommodate them, and I urge the council to reject any proposal to do so. I do so also because what we're experiencing is not a failure of a well-meaning policy not operating as originally intended. The reality is the form-based code is functioning exactly as it was intended to, and that is to maximize the profit margins of real estate profiteers and lock out the poor, people of color, and any others the real estate industry views as undesirable. I'm sure this comes as a shock to the multitude of residents who have been skewered as reactionaries and NIMBYs for raising concerns about the aggressive liberalization of our land use policies, but form-based zoning is actually a fundamentally libertarian project. In fact, the mastermind behind it is one Charles Marone, a self-identified free market fundamentalist and conservative Republican, and the loudest cheerleaders for the market-based approach to affordability are organizations like the Cato Institute and the Movement Conservative Manhattan Institute. I would further and I appreciate the full disclosure we got earlier, but I would further urge all residents to question why the proposal for intensifying this market strategy will be coming to us from a planning commission chaired by Mr. Crome, who reportedly intends to be the developer to build on the site formerly occupied by the Church of the Evangel in South Narberth. I'd also urge folks to consider the fact that he and his spouse, respectively, work for SEPTA and Amtrak, as we heard earlier, and professionally advocate for TOD and high-density development while they analyze the proposal for the site across the street from the train station. In conclusion, I'd simply like to draw everyone in Narberth's attention to the ideological inconsistencies at play here. Respectfully, our council and the individuals who occupy the various borough commissions are all by and large self-identified progressives, so I would question then why their rhetoric on the subject of land use and housing is virtually indistinguishable from that of J.D. Vance and Greg Gianforte. Perhaps it's time for a new approach. Thank you.
Adam, 1 second. Adam, do you wish to respond to that?
I'm not a developer.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
I could respond further, but I mean,
okay, Adam's not a developer, and if anybody had any financial interest in any property and this came up, we would expect them to announce their conflict of interest and step aside and not be a part of the discussion. It's not relevant at this time. I will also question where you got your $4,500 a month figure. Where did that come from?
It's about the average, and I believe that's what we know the apartments that are not being filled above Jenny's Ice Cream go for. I know that the price of the Elm's successfully filled, but the prices are astronomical. They range from generously $3,000 to $3,500 at the low end to $5,000 for the bigger ones. So that would be where.
So I think that with the caveat that new units may be particularly high, I think the average for the borough as a whole might be around 2,000. That's what I saw when I looked it up on.
Well, I've been looking myself because I'd like to move on with my life at some point, and I haven't found a single one anywhere near 2,000. Unless I wanted to live in like a closet, like, with a toilet in the hall and, a washing machine that would be shared with 10 other people, but.
I pulled Zillow estimates for every single thing, and for things built before 2010 in apartment buildings, the average, at least at that point, was $1,704. $1,704.
And do they have any available?
Every single unit in the entire borough, as far as I could find, from December 2024 on Zillow. Zillow's not perfect, but it's a good point of reference. So anyway, just wanted to provide that data.
Okay.
That was median, so I went with that so they wouldn't be skewed by a mean.
Well, if you do find some that are listed, pass them on to John.
Yeah, for sure.
Lee?
I would just like to speak about,
Can you give your name and
I like
address?
Lee Hawkinson, 203 Wayne Avenue. I would like to speak on building equity. And I, over the last 5 years, have taken much joy meeting new homeowners. They have ranged from young professionals to individuals wanting to have a family and folks that already have young children. I myself have 2 young children. I want to make sure that we are not forgetting that people buy here and live here for the proximity to our parks, for the infrastructure. This is very important when we're talking about seniors and supporting our senior community. If we want to keep them here and support them, we need our open space, we need our parks. And if we strip that, we are adversely affecting those homeowners and the prices. It is not a. I don't know why our conversations aren't including the infrastructure and how we are investing in our infrastructure and protecting our parks alongside, because that is what also maintains property values here. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Katie Skeen, 227 Hampton. So I didn't write anything out, and I'm kind of glad I didn't bother, because I feel like Michael and Jean and Andrea, like you, spoke so eloquently. I really just came to hear the discussion. And I guess I just want to say, I've lived here almost 20 years, and what I've seen is that the way that we move so slowly in Narberth, in the name of not changing has in fact had consequences, negative consequences. It has changed Narberth. It means our population has declined. It means retail is struggling. So I guess I would say, why would we want to go even more slowly than we already have been going? And why would we want to pause or take these halting steps? In terms of what Cindy was talking about, like, well, people say they don't like apartments. I feel like what you guys said was so eloquent. Like, if we had a town crier, that would be awesome. If we had a newspaper, that would be awesome. We don't have those things. And I understand that Facebook is not a great place to put this stuff out either, but if there was a way to somehow, and Andrea, I know you didn't like write anything out, but we should transcribe what you said because it was beautiful. But getting that information, I think, in front of more people is important, and I don't think the information is getting there. I appreciate the point about you need a greater supply of housing if you want prices to come down. So complaining about the price of the new apartments is kind of off the topic, because new apartments mean that other apartments in Narberth become older in comparison, and therefore they become affordable. And I thought, Fred, you made a good point about the mixed consequences of the HARB, that it's preventing tear downs, but it's also making it harder to build that missing middle. So I don't know what we can do about that. I know, like, we have the HARB, people like it because it prevents tear downs. But that's kind of the missing middle problem, is that we can't build a missing middle in the places where it's even zoned. We can't have twins and duplexes in the places where we can zone for twins and duplexes already. So that might be something to look at. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say. I really support the TOD stuff. And Michael, I love that you brought up all the historical information in about how Narberth has always been a TOD town, because that matches up with research that I've done over the years as well. And I was really surprised to learn that we can't actually build apartments right now. That seemed a little strange. So I don't know what changed in the zoning, because we used to be able to build apartments, and now it sounds like
it requires a approval process that goes through.
Yeah, it's not that we can't, it's just become so onerous that people don't want to.
I did that research years ago, and like by law, we have to allow for all housing types.
I believe that you were supposed to zone them by right in some places, and we do not currently do that. So it's another thing for us to look at.
Yeah, and then that also seems like that's been a change. I wasn't aware that the change came into this, but that sounds like we're going backwards, not forwards. And so I don't want to pause, I don't want to go backwards, I want to go forwards. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Folks in the second row, if you wish to make a comment? No? Joe?
Joe Toscano, 120 Rockland, and I'm here tonight just in my personal capacity as a resident of the borough.
Your secret identity?
I just want to thank the council for the discussion over about TOD this evening. I thought there were a lot of really good points raised and good discussions, and I don't feel the need to repeat everything that you guys were already saying. Like many others, part of the reason that my family and I moved to the borough is because it's walkable, because it's well connected to transit. These are real strengths that we have as an arbor, and we should be doing everything we can to support them and to strengthen them going forward in the future. You guys already made a lot of these points already about the potential value of TOD policy, why we're a good candidate for it, how Narberth has been a TOD town even before TOD was a term. It promotes walkability, supports local businesses, allows for a wider range of housing types in Narberth. I would remind also the council's commitment to transitioning the borough to 100% renewable energy. We had a presentation from Grant earlier on electricity, and that's one component of it, but transportation is another component of it. And even though we already do have a good amount of transit use and bicycle use and walkability in Narberth, we still have a high share of transportation by car in Narberth. That's still the case there. So anything we can do to support transit use and transit development, I think, is a helpful thing. This is something Montgomery County is also encouraging municipalities to be looking into and considering as well. Just two more points just that I heard in some of the discussion. This transit-oriented development doesn't just benefit young professionals who might be living in the apartments, it benefits the whole community, right? Families who may not have a car, but might be low car usage and rely primarily on transit and walking and biking to get around Narberth and Philadelphia on the main line. The more we can do to support transit use and potentially increase frequency of service, the more it benefits the whole community, not just the people who might be living in the apartments or living in whatever housing is developed right around the train station. It helps the whole borough. In terms of the question of why now, why not wait, I think Councilmember Borough made the point that if our ridership on the Narberth station is low, that threatens SEPTA's continued service to the borough potentially. If we were to lose, if the frequency of service were to decrease or we were to lose completely, we would see considerable increases in the amount of driving and the amount of cars in the borough, and the amount of parking needed. It would, I think, be disastrous because a lot of people who live in the borough have moved here and set up their lives and their work habits around being able to access transit. And I think we should be doing things that we can to support that and encourage that. And I think it would be a major transformation in the wrong direction for Narberth if we were to lose our transit service because we're not investing in it and not supporting it. It would drastically change Narberth to make it a car-dependent community. I don't think many of us want that. So I think again for the discussion, it seems like you have expertise in the Planning Commission to discuss and research and study this issue further. And so thank you for discussing it tonight.
Thank you. Adam, you
I just, I don't want to say too much of your time because I will probably want to adjourn, but I'll just mention that the Planning Commission, under the previous chair a year or two ago, did host a affordable housing developer who just gave an informational presentation on their line of business. And this was housing that was specifically related to how much income you would have, so that you would qualify to live in the apartment building. And the developer explained, the difficulty in putting together, that's really what they do, is they develop this type of housing. They do it with, say, tax credits, affordable housing tax credits, and then they typically also need other forms of essentially funding to make it work, because essentially the cost of the development and the construction and so on, you can't pay for that with low rents without essentially other forms of funding going into the project, that the public sector or nonprofits would provide. And it is a struggle to basically make anything except very expensive single-family homes that you can actually do it essentially, right, financially. And I just wanted to mention, that we can. I myself asked about condos, and the comments related to equity. This is not, anecdotes aren't data. Data is not our personal experience. So I don't want to say that. I think we need to be careful that our personal experience, drive our decision making. But from my own personal experience, in your letter, I did include the Marion Manor apartments down at the next train station. Those are currently condos. They were turned into condos a few years ago. It's a historic apartment building. It's a courtyard format. And I have lived in two buildings exactly like that when I was younger. They were more affordable than say a large single family home was, when you're 23 years old or whatever. But my personal experience was when we went to sell, we did get a check back, but we were mostly just getting back the down payment we had put in, because we actually weren't successful at quote building equity over a number of years in those condos. So I love them. They were not too expensive, And the vintage buildings are absolutely charming when they have, craftsman woodwork details and things like that, that are just, lovely places to live, and the windows and the views and so on. But whether or not something appreciates in value is driven by a lot of different factors. And in our personal case, again, not beta, like when we went to move, then we had to sell the property and, or lease it out and then sell it and so on. And there can be challenges with being a condo owner as well as the advantages. So we're happy to look at all of these formats, but ultimately, the private sector and the builders and so on, those are the ones that have to make it work to actually deliver the housing.
Not you.
All
right. Just underscoring
the
that.
cost.
Thank you.
Right now, the cost to there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now, so I'm hoping that that's not going to bleed over to, the cost of lumber could go up, or the cost of a lot of things could go up. So.
All right. Anybody else in the room? Anybody online? Carol Marie, hello. Carol Marie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go. Go ahead.
Thanks. Carol Marie Scanlon, Sabine Avenue. So, Fred, at the March 20th meeting, you presented a subdivision plan to explore selling off Sabine Park to a yet unnamed developer. And you also talked about exploring rezoning Sabine Park to 5B commercial for that development. What I would like to know is I'd like for you to justify why you want to sell Sabine Park. In the past, the reason you talked about not wanting to keep the property is because you don't want to be a landlord. Narberth is overdeveloped as it is. It's been discussed during this meeting here. We really don't need more apartments, more commercial space. Also, when you think about selling off a property in a borough, in a town, Narberth is financially solvent. We have income. You've raised the EIT again this year, so we have additional income. Why the need to sell the property at all? Narberth is not in financial straits. So, what is the specific reason? The community advocates a park on Sabine, not commercial development. And you say, yes, there'll be green space, but why another development? Is it because it's going to be bookends to match that huge development over at the old Albrecht site? Sabine Park is in a residential area. It was talked about it being 3A, 3B. It's a residential area. It does not need to be commercialized. Mike Salmonson, said at the last meeting, if you proceed with this development, you're buying litigation. That's a very true thing that could be going on. In 2019, there was community meetings, and the community spoke loud and clear that the number one was not development on that site. The community, the residents of the area are still saying, we do not want apartments, we do not want commercial on that site. Now, that's my comment about Sabine Park, but I also want to talk about this development around the borough and affordable housing. Have you actually explored what the housing inventory is and the variety of houses in Narberth? The new builds are right blazingly in front of us, but as the meeting was on, I was looking at sold houses in Zillow recently. There are houses in the $300,000 range, and the $400,000 range, and the $500,000 range that have all sold recently in Narberth. So it's not just all big, huge houses and expensive houses that are available and have sold. Additionally, just because someone wants to live in Narberth doesn't mean a house has to be provided for them. When we recently bought a property, and I knew where I wanted to be, and I waited and looked and explored, and when something became available, I bought it. But we don't have to provide houses for everybody who wants to live in Narberth. A variety of houses are already here, so I'm not really understanding why we need more development, especially on Sabine Park.
All right, thank you for your comment. I'll point out that we did not authorize any sale of the property. What we authorized is an appraisal on a portion of the property.
Yes, you're correct. You authorized a exploratory on, but when you're exploring the possibility of selling it. And that is not what we want.
I just want to be careful here so that our listeners are not misled. I know it's not your intention to mislead people, but we should point out that we are not selling this property. We did not vote to sell the property. What we voted for was to have it appraised. And I will also point out that more than 2/3 of 201 Sabine is currently developed, right? It's a building and it's a parking lot. There is a 1-acre park on that site. And I am glad that you and your neighbors share the idea that there should be more green space on that property with Borough Council, because that's our idea as well. There should be more green space on that spot. And I will also point out that we did not raise the earned income tax this year. The earned income tax is at 0.75%, which is the same as it was last year.
Did the EIT go into effect February 1st at the higher rate?
Last year.
It went into effect, we voted in 2023 to increase it to 0.75%. That went into effect in 2024. It is now 2025. It is the same rate as it was February of last year.
Thank you for clarifying that. But when you talk about the development or a subdivision plan, it is with the intention that you're looking to do something with the property. And that is our grave concern, that we do not want a commercial development. Now, additionally, part of that parking lot is park.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to make a public comment online at this time? Please unmute yourself. Deborah.
Yes, hi. I've been listening, and
do you want to give your name and address?
I have a couple of concerns about this idea of building higher. I think that we have to be very careful of that because, we decided to keep the downtown at 3 stories, and there was a good reason for that. It was because we didn't want a dark downtown. We have a very tiny downtown, and we have a very tiny borough. If you go to Roxborough and you look at the construction there with the tall modern buildings that are 4 stories high, we kind of put willy-nilly throughout the neighborhoods and on the main drag of Roxborough, they are absolutely hideous. There is no cohesion to the plan down there. And if we just start throwing in 4-story buildings here and there, it's just going to look terrible. And, I don't think most people want that. I think if you listen to the residents, if you polled the residents, you would find that they really don't want that. And they certainly don't want it next to their house because it does affect property value, having apartment buildings next to your house. I tend to side with what Cindy Rickards was advocating for, which is waiting and seeing how we do with the enormous amount of construction that has to go on downtown before we start any other enormous projects. And the other thing is, do we need more apartments? Because we're almost half apartments as we are, and we do not take care of our renters as it is. We have no landlord regulations. We have nothing that a renter can do. We have no recourse for renters. Only Montgomery County does, and you can't walk into the borough and get redress for a problem with a landlord in Narberth. And we're the only community around here that has that, which I frankly find shameful. We had a death due to, poorly regulated rentals. And I'm not sure what more it takes than somebody dying for you to do something about monitoring the landlords and the rental situation in Narberth. And now you want to add more apartments. I would advocate for condominiums as well. Maybe you come up with incentives for them to build condominiums. But if you start to have a community that is over 50% rentals, you start to lose the cohesion of that community. You start to lose the investment that homeowners make in a community, which you would get if you had condominiums. I think condominiums would be extremely popular, and I understand we can't force people to build condominiums, but there are incentives. You can do things to encourage people. I do not think we're going to lose our train station anytime soon. That's a bit of a scare tactic there. And I also want to say just one last thing. I'm very afraid of building without any accommodation for cars. Maybe we are seeing less cars, but the difference between 0 cars and 1 car is enormous. 0 cars means somebody uses transit and has a bicycle, perhaps. But when you have 1 car, you need space for it. And when you have a family and you have children, you basically, around here, you have a car. That's kind of just the way it is. I would like to see it different, sure, but that's not how our society is. We do not have excellent public transit. And until we do, people are going to rely on cars. And we just have to be practical about that.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Okay, well, thank you for
And can you
hearing
give
me.
your name and your address for the record, please?
She's got it.
Deborah Lonstra.
I'm sorry, what? My address,
Name and your
128
address.
Chestnut Avenue.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Okay, you're welcome.
Is there anybody else online who wishes to make a comment? I don't see anybody, but I was surprised before. So, Emily, is there anybody else? Okay, great. I'm going to close public comment.
I just want to follow up on Katie's point about having perhaps a public session to go over transit-oriented development. Michael spent 2.5 hours, 3 hours with me one night at the Greeks. He's got tons of data and tons, Adam said, let's not talk about anecdotes, let's look at data. There's a lot that Michael could unpack, I think, to the public and explain all the advantages to this in a meaningful way, in a way that maybe people don't think about necessarily. And I think it would be really useful if we encouraged having a community session with a forum. I hate to put you on the spot, Michael,
it's a good.
But it gave me a lot of food for thought.
Yeah, and Mike, if I can interject though, I would also say, why don't you do this as one? Because I agree, like people need to not comment on Facebook or catch us while we're out. They need to come to a meeting. They need to write, and they need to be educated. So I think if you're holding one of the meet and greets or office hours, Michael Galdini, if you're open, can we pick 2 days, like one during the day and one in the evening, where folks can drop in, get a brief, not a 2.5 hour, but just kind of a brief lecture or an opportunity to learn more and communicate?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Or a town hall. I mean, Aaron Muedrick used to do those, right? He'd have his annual town hall.
Well, let's start by seeing what Planning Commission comes back to us with, but I think the idea of having an informal session might make a lot of sense as well. I mean, if it's going to depend on what we're being asked to do, what's on the agenda. If it's relatively minor, maybe we don't need it. If there's big changes proposed, then yeah. So it's going to depend on what is proposed and what we decide we're going to consider, I would say. Okay, but I do appreciate the suggestion and the enthusiasm to go ahead with it. Any other announcements for the good council? Okay. We are going to have an executive session after this meeting to discuss some lease agreements. We will probably not come back. There's nothing for us to approve exactly. No. So we will not come back into session afterwards. I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second? Okay. All those in favor of adjourning? Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. I'll turn off the recording. Oh, no, Cindy needs to stay on. Take a recording.
Still turn off the recording.
Turn off.